And it all goes back to what we talked about at the beginning of the show. We know we're getting the precipitation. We know we're getting a lot of that cold air, but we don't know just how much of that cold air and how far south it's going to come. So we know that places in the higher elevations in western North Carolina are in for a snowstorm. The big question, it's always the big question if you've lived anywhere in western North Carolina or upstate South Carolina for any period of time, is what is going to happen along the Interstate 85 corridor, because that always seems to be the meeting place of the cold air and the warm air. Let's start with Chris Jackson. He is in Columbia, South Carolina, so a little bit further south of that Interstate 85 corridor, but I want to get his thoughts, and then of course we'll bring back in Scotty Powell because he's in the mountains along Interstate 40, and they're going to have a much different scenario. Chris, I know you are trying to figure out exactly what this snow is going to do, because it's going to play a big factor in what type of precipitation you see across the Midlands.
Absolutely, James. So, looking at it right now, the latest, I guess, that I can give everyone that feels pretty confident is, for the Midlands of South Carolina, really along the I-20 corridor and point south, it's going to be an all rain event. It's just going to be too warm. And, going north from Columbia up 26 toward the Greenville-Spartanburg area to around the 385-26 split, Lawrence County, draw a line back over to Chester. Actually, I'll share my screen here. I actually got this pulled up. And, this is something we put out earlier. I've got this area highlighted yellow for an high impact winter event possible. It's just going to depend on the exact track of the low pressure and also the strength of the high pressure in New England. How much cold air is it able to get down to the surface and throughout the entire column. And that's just stuff that's unknown right now. And until we know it, some of the impacts, especially across the Midlands in the southern part of the South Carolina upstate, it's just really unknown. But, going forward into the upstate, I-85, Greenville, Spartanburg, and north of Anderson, I think they're for a pretty significant winter storm. I think they're going to get a mixed bag, some snow, some ice, sleet, probably a little bit of rain on top of that in the mix somewhere. But the biggest thing is if you're in the upstate, especially above I-85, you should be preparing for, significant winter storm. That's as far as I can say for the Midlands and the upstate of South Carolina, and kick it over to Scotty.
Yeah, thank you for that, Chris. A much different story here in Western North Carolina. I can work graphics, or if I can ask you guys to pull up a few graphics. Chris, the one that we kind of broke down, the snow, sleet, wintry mix, I think James had that. And also, James, if we could break down the different precipitation types, because I want to kind of talk about both of those here in this update. I'm just going to be honest with you. This has the potential to be a very significant historic winter weather event, especially in Western North Carolina. If you live in the mountains, the foothills, and even along the Interstate 40 corridor, and I'm talking about locations like Hickory, Statesville, up into Taylorsville, Lenoir, Morganton, Marion, places like that, we are going to be right on this line of what we call the warm nose. And so Chris has got up the first graphic that I was wanting to talk about. Right now, it looks like if you are in places in the North Carolina mountains, obviously, but if you're in McDowell County, Burke County, up into Caldwell, Alexander, Wilkes, even Catawba County, it looks like we're going to stay snow sleet. Now, the more sleet that we get, the lower accumulation snow mount we're going to get. And the reason that is anytime you get sleet, it kind of kills your snowfall forecast. Ideally, I think we all want snow because snow is going to be more manageable. But if we get sleet, and definitely if we get some freezing rain, it's going to cause a lot of disruption, not only on the roads, but also with trees and power lines. So that is the first concern, is where does this snow, sleet, freezing rain line set up? The next graphic I want to show you, James, if we could go to the next one. There it is. Perfect. And this is what makes our forecast so difficult. James was talking about the Interstate 85 corridor. Well, Mother Nature has no idea that Interstate 85 is there. It's a landmark, just like Interstate 40 is a landmark for us. It's just kind of, where we like to reference things. We know at the surface, we have instruments like the weather stem piece that we just did. We have temperature readings that we can place throughout the area that we know what the temperature is at the surface. The hardest thing is, what's the temperature above us? What's the temperature 2, 3, 4, 5,000 feet above our heads? And that's going to determine on what type of winter precipitation we get. If that entire column of air is below freezing, we're going to get all snow. Right now, I'm pretty confident to say the mountains are probably going to get all snow. And I'm almost confident enough to say places like McDowell, Burke, Caldwell, Alexander, and Wilkes County are going to see all snow. I'm worried about this warm nose is what we call. And that's where the sleet, that's where you saw that little orange sector of air. Wherever that warm nose sets up, that's going to create just difficulties. And that's why we're not comfortable enough to give you a snowfall accumulation map yet, because it all depends on this track of the low pressure. If the track of the low pressure is closer to Jared, let's say in Charleston, that's going to allow the warmer air to be more into places like Charlotte, Lincolnton, Hickory, places like that. Great graphic that we got up. But if we can get that track just off the coast, let's say 20, 50 miles off the coast of the Carolinas, that allows that cold air to be dragged further in. And that's going to mean you might see more snow in places like Charlotte, Gastonia, Monroe, Concord, down even into Spartanburg and Greenville, South Carolina. So we know that we're going to get a storm system. We know we're going to get some sort of wintry precipitation. We know we're going to have enough that's going to accumulate. We just don't know how much of that accumulation. And that won't be determined until at least tomorrow, once we can get into some of the short-term models. I think the NAM is finally starting to get in on the forecast. So tomorrow we'll have a better idea of this exact storm track. If you want snow, you want this storm track to be off the coast. If you want ice, and I don't know why you would want ice, but if you want ice, you would want it to be a little bit closer, hugging the coastline. If you want a rain event, which it looks like it may be the least likely, you would want that low pressure to actually track inland of the Carolinas. Now, one thing that we haven't really discussed, and Jared and Chris and James, I'd love to bring you in on this.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen these crazy amount of snowfall totals being predicted in North Carolina and even the upstate. The one caveat in this system that I know we haven't really talked about, but it seems to happen on occasion, very rare occasion, so why I want to mention it up, is if we get any convection along the Gulf Coast, coastal Florida, coastal Mississippi, Alabama, that could rob some of the moisture transport into our area, and where we could see less wintry precipitation than what's expected. So I throw that question out to you guys. That is the only fly in the ointment that I see that could really kill our chances of seeing these historic snowfall numbers.
Oh, definitely. It happened this past weekend with the severe setup across South Carolina. Going back, just the moisture became so limited in the afternoon that you weren't able to get any convection basically north of Savannah. I watched 4 storms come right to me at the Savannah River, and they lost everything the time they got to the river, and with that drier air aloft. So that's definitely something to watch